everybody. Hope you are having a wonderful Monday. I'm sure we all had a great time this last week at the holiday and fireworks shows. We got to watch two. Of course, Michael went down by the lake and set off a whole bunch. Our son came in from the Army. It was just one. I hope you had a great holiday as well. We have a two-part series starting today called Spreadsheet Savvy. And this is going to be part one of this two-part series, teaching you how to monitor your investments and how to build the spreadsheets to do that. We are going to have some awesome information coming out the rest of summer, wonderful webinars, and then we're going to start our new series that's going to go over the basics of landlording. We have lots of new city snapshots that you can go view on our website and on social media. Cleburne is one of our new ones. We've got lots of new video of the incredible things happening at the suburbs around us. And so definitely, if you haven't checked those out, please do. So today we've got the webinar on spreadsheets on the 15th. So just a couple days, we're going to have our live rate update. This is going to be with my good friend and financial expert, Daniel Munoz. If you have seen my other webinars with him, he's just a wealth of knowledge. On the 25th, we're going to have reinventing your rental strategies to maximize returns through reevaluation. On the 14th, we're going to have Screen Smart. That's going to be maximizing tenant selection in your rental properties. Next, on the 30th, we're going to have the power of $1 million portfolio. And finally, the last one's going to be from the ground up, why new construction is the right investment model. And that will lead us into our fall series. So again, rate update in 2 days. Can't wait to see you there. This is going to be a live webinar with a Q&A, a little bit different than our usual, but it's definitely going to be one I recommend you attend. We're going to talk about what's happening with the Fed, what we're seeing in the financial markets, what's happening with conventional lending, and what we expect going into the election and beyond. Then we're going to have reinventing your rentals, and this will be on the 25th, and these will be the two to round out the rest of July. So again, if you want to register for these, you can go to this QR here, or you can register for each one individually. If you've missed a webinar, or if you can't attend a time, you can always go to our podcast channels, YouTube, website, social media, or you can just email us info@slaughterinvesting.com, and we can send you a link. The best way to stay up to date is to join our mailing list. This is where you're going to find out about upcoming events, in-person events, webinars, and everything else that we have going on, as well as updates for our market and the overall real estate and financial markets. We have a property tour on the 12th. We have one on the 26th, and then we have one August 9th. These are visiting all of our top markets. We would absolutely love to see you there. We are going to have 2 in August, 2 in September, and our next weekend tour is September 21st. Before I begin, everything I'm going to talk about today is based on my best experience and my time, not only owning and operating a real estate firm, but also as a real estate high volume investor. I'm one tool in the toolbox. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you that type of advice, but what I can do is tell you what I use in my own investment journey and connect you to those that can help you in yours. So let's get started with Spreadsheet Savvy. I am huge in spreadsheets, and so this is a webinar I've been wanting to do this series for a long time, but it's difficult because not everybody understands how to use Excel. And so we're going to go through the basics of Excel, and then we're going to go through what formulas we use and what spreadsheets we use to track our portfolio and how that has helped me build my $44 million real estate portfolio. For those of you that don't know me, my husband and I own multiple companies all around real estate. We have lots of real estate and investments, and we've been speaking around the US and on radio, TV, etc. for about the last 20 years, talking about what we've done and what we do. So we're going to talk about the basics of Excel, useful real estate formulas that we use every day, and then taking a look at analyzing one of my spreadsheets on one of my properties. Now, this is a big webinar. There's going to be a lot of information. So this is probably one that you're going to go and want to watch on the backside, and we'll certainly have the ability to answer questions you have after the fact if you think of any, because we're going to cover a lot of information today. So this is just a snapshot of one of my spreadsheets, and it tells you really everything that I'm monitoring from a high level. And so this is a lot of what I'm going to teach you to do today. So, and then in part 2, we're going to go into deep detail over the property tracking spreadsheet. So I can tell you all the metrics I track, and we might even have a little bonus spreadsheet given out to you for attending. So that'll be August 1st at 12 and at 8. So Excel is complicated. It has so much that it can do, and most of us only touch the surface. There are actually degrees in schools specifically dedicated to perfecting using Excel and building spreadsheets. We're not going to be able to cover every facet of Excel during this webinar, but this webinar is designed to give you a leg up on building your spreadsheets like a real estate pro. And if you want additional lessons on spreadsheets, you can always book a call with me and I can walk through what you're using and what I use to help you. Part of what we do on calls is an intake process that actually utilizes a spreadsheet to analyze your portfolio. And so this is something that we use in every facet of our business. Let's get started. So the most traditional way to access a spreadsheet is through Microsoft Excel. Now, I have Apple, my entire office is Mac. And so sometimes we will use Numbers, which is the Apple version. They're pretty similar, but the way that they work in terms of the formulas and how you get to the formulas and charting, it's a little bit different. There are some things that I love the product that Mac has better, and most things Excel makes more sense. If you're using like an online storage where you're sharing it with other people, typically Excel is going to be your better product. And like if you're using Teams or something like that, then it has to be Excel because it does not work with the Mac programs. But it's not the only way to build a spreadsheet these days. You can even do it on your iPhone, your iPad. You can download the app Sheets, which serves basically the exact same function, and it's completely compatible. So if you have a Google or Gmail account, you can also create a Google Sheet completely for free. They are all spreadsheets, but how you make it do things is what varies. So it's important to know that no matter which of the methods you use, that they allow you to export it as an XLS file, which is an Excel file, and that those files can be used and sent between platforms and to other people. For the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be using Microsoft Office, and that is because it is the one that most people use. And again, the functionality is the same, pretty much the same across all platforms. It just looks a little bit different in how you do things. The reason that I love spreadsheets is for organization, analysis, comparison, and visualization and reporting. These are really important metrics when you are running a portfolio or running a company. When we talk about data organization, spreadsheets allow you to consolidate, organize, and have together a lot of information all in one place. That can include details on your properties, the financial information, the tenancy and occupancy information, and your history. And you can really build it to hold any information that you want. So while you're dealing with maybe 5 properties, 10 properties, it becomes important. When you get to my level and you're dealing with hundreds of properties, you have no other option. So while it might not be difficult to track if you're just dealing with one rental, by the time you get to 5, 10, 20, even more, it's essential to have tools like this to help. And if you develop it while you only have a few, then it's very easy to translate when you have more and it's not so overwhelming. Having a centralized place that information is pulled from also makes it easier to update that property information and remove or add properties. Now, what I do is I add a tab to all of my spreadsheets, and that is where I track my 1031s and my sold properties. So instead of deleting a property off my spreadsheet when I sell, I merely move it to a new tab that fits its criteria. Spreadsheets are going to track things you may not have a problem tracking by hand, like rental income or monthly expenses or net cash flow. And I use it for a high level assumption, right? So I'm not actually tracking my monthly cash flow in Excel. I have a program that does that. Your management system, if you have a property manager, is going to do that. Your CPA, your tax return. I am tracking it to see what it should be, what my high level overview is. So then I can use that to compare against my actual to see anything that I need to tweak or change, things that may not be right. But when you set it up properly, it can also track things more complicated, like a return on investment, long-term appreciation, value, etc. And most importantly, it doesn't make mistakes. So as long as the data you feed it is correct, and as long as the formulas you built are correct, you don't have to worry about human error. And this is huge. You can use those figures then to make comparisons between properties, provide to lenders for when you're doing loans in the future. Very important to have all this information at your fingertips. When I go apply for a loan for a rental property, or I re-up my guidance line, or whatever it is I'm doing, everything is at my fingertips. I don't have to go do anything. And that makes me more lendable. It gives my banks more confidence, and it allows you to go further. It allows you to have access to better products and better placement of those products because you have your ducks in a row. Really important. I do consult calls all week, every week, and I cannot tell you how many people have no idea what their cash flow is, no idea what their property's worth, no idea what they owe, no idea what their interest rate is. One simple spreadsheet that takes you an hour to build can fix all of that and puts you in control of driving your property and your return. So when we use spreadsheets, it puts a number of tools in your toolbox, like what if scenarios, seeing your long-term results, comparing your properties, testing strategies, and also figuring out when it's time to sell 1031, when a property needs some type of tweak, all sorts of things that you can do. Spreadsheets also open up the creation of lots of other resources that can help. And so that allows you to see graphs, it allows you to have charts and tables. And so each of us learn differently, and this is a great way to have options to present the information. We also can spot trends and see patterns and identify outliers, which is exactly what we do when we recommend someone sell instead of do a cash out. So we can use these visual representations to do some of the above. These visualizations also have another advantage. Not everyone speaks real estate and not everyone is good with numbers, but almost anyone, including people you might give the results to, can understand a graph or a chart. This is especially important when you're talking to others or when you're working with, maybe you're working with your CPA, or maybe you're working with your lender, maybe you're trying to teach your kids how to do real estate. There's just so many reasons why having that information that can translate into other forms is great. And this is just the tip of the iceberg on why spreadsheets help. Other benefits might include tracking project management tasks, making micro decisions, tenant and lease management, and regulatory compliance and documentation. And this is really important if you don't have a property manager, because I can't tell you how many people, they might have properties with us, but then they might own properties where they live and they're self-managing or they have a short-term rental and they don't have this information at their fingertips. I find that people are one of two ways. Either they're completely organized and they have everything together, or they have basically no idea. They just think that they have this information in their head, but in reality, some of it's outdated, it's old, they don't realize how much things have changed. So the moral of the story is spreadsheets rule. And I've been quoted as saying many times that spreadsheets are my love language. I use them for everything. I use them for check sheets, for all of my businesses, for all my employees. They make fun of me because I use so much of it, but I literally could not do what I do without them. And now you're ready to jump into Excel itself. So from talking to people ahead of this webinar, we know that people are starting out at all different skill levels. So we're going to go over some of the fundamentals before we get into breaking down one of my favorite spreadsheets. When we look at Excel, there's a few basics that we want to know. Down the left column is the row. Across the top is the column. The cell are the individual pieces that come together to merge a row and a column. And then the worksheet are those tabs that I'm talking about where you can track different things. So a column is a vertical division, typically represents a type of data, like each property could be its own column. Rows typically represent a single record or entry, like this is where your data records, like property name, price, etc. Cells are individual boxes where columns and rows intersect, and those data points are stored and recorded. And then finally, the sheet is the entire separate workbook that can be used to track different kinds or sets of data. So this is where I would have one for my sold properties, one for my active properties, and then another tab to track the different 1031 makeups of groups of properties that go together. Now, I like to have my property addresses across the top and all of my data down the columns. Some people do it the other way. It just depends on what works for you. So if we have a very basic set of data, this shows you how that looks. So you can see here across the top, each property has its own column, and down the rows, we see the different information that we are implementing across the columns. Now, these are not real properties. This is all made up. Now, before we move on, a quick note on formatting. If you see the circle here, using that tool, you can make it so certain numbers follow the basic rules of money. I recommend using currency formatting, and expenses are in red with parentheses and revenue then in green. And so that will look like the sample here at the bottom right. And that is how I do my spreadsheets. Tables are also a useful tool for sorting and filtering data. So you can select a table while highlighting a group of data, and then it can create sortable lists. So below is what it looks like initially, but if you click on the arrow by each of these headers on the columns, you can sort the data so that all the cities are close to each other, or that all similarly priced properties are by one another. So lots of different ways to sort the data. You can also sort by address, and you can sort by rent amount. You can also use tables to easily filter data. Let's say you only want to see properties in Greenville. You can right-click on the word Greenville and then use the following tools. You click Filter and then Filter by Sales Value Greenville, and then you will see just your Greenville properties. You can screen grab this page if you have any questions about tables as well. The pros are it's easier to sort without disrupting other data entries. It can be more pleasing on the eye when dealing with large data sets. And Excel does a lot of the organizational heavy lifting without sacrificing the underlying data. Now, the cons are it's very difficult to add or remove data while in table form. less compatible when exporting or trying to send data to others, and you're limited in the formulas, and there's going to be a bigger explanation on that later. So when we talk about tables, it can be harder to add or remove data entries from tables themselves. So it's pivotal to have spreadsheets that are holding on or being referenced for the source data. One way you can do that is to duplicate the actual sheet that you're working on and then create the table. While we're talking about formats Excel can automatically change data into, let's talk about how to transform data into charts and graphs. So let's say you want a pie chart of where your monthly rental money comes from. You can press Insert, you can highlight the data that you want, and then select the pie chart in the 2D pie to create a pie chart. That's all it takes. The pie chart and its legend can be customized any way you want, but remember to always double check the data that you have entered before you create your pie chart. These are the tools that we are all using that seem so difficult, but they're truly not. You can also use that same method to quickly create graphs, line graphs, or scatter plots. For other charts and visuals, there's a few different times you'd want to consider each data type, but here's a cheat sheet of examples that might help for investors. For pie charts, you might see a portfolio comparison, an expense breakdown, or revenue sources. For a bar graph, you might have a comparative analysis, expense comparison, or rental rates. For the scatter plot, you might have price versus city, or rental income versus value, or a market analysis. And for the line graph, you might have market trends, a cash flow analysis, or occupancy rates and times. If you're looking for a more in-depth kind of webinar on this topic, we talked about charts and graphs in depth in our goal setting webinar early this year. And so if you scan this QR code here, or you go to our YouTube or any of our channels, you can find this information and go watch that. Now, before we move on to formulas, here are a few keyboard shortcuts that will make your Excel experience easier. If you want to take a picture of this, I'll hold here for a moment. Now, helpful shortcuts. This is just scratching the surface of the keyboard function, so don't fret about them. But if you find one that's helpful, remember, how does it do that? You can always take a picture, you can always make a chart, and if you Google, you can find big lists of all the shortcuts that you can use. I only use about 10 of them. I know there's hundreds, but they're great if you find the shortcut for the thing that you're using all the time. I've even seen people, and I think I have employees who've printed out a little cheat sheet and put it on their desk. Now, we're going to leave the world of the basics, and we're going to go into what Excel can do specifically to transform your real estate journey with formulas. Formulas in Excel can be tricky things. For example, our investment team partners spend weeks building and updating the formulas that we use for our performers at OmniKey. In fact, Excel formulas are something that plenty of people pay a lot of money for. And while we can't reveal all of our formulas in this webinar, we can do one better. We're going to give you the building blocks so that you can start working on your own formula, build your tracking for what you want to see. If you give a man a spreadsheet, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to spreadsheet, and you feed him for a lifetime. So let's start with how you insert a formula using some of our data from before. If you put the equal sign, it tells Excel you're starting a formula. B5 in this formula references the data in the cell, and the formula is going to change if the data changes. And then the star serves as the multiple operator for this formula. You can use whole numbers or an entirely separate cell of data in your formulas. As soon as you click enter on the following formula, the math will be done. So as you'll see here, you can drag the tiny square to the bottom right to move cells in your row, and Excel is automatically going to apply that formula to the nearby data sets. Just by knowing the basics of creating a formula this way, using basic operators plus, minus, times, and divide, you already have access to many of real estate's most important metrics like net operating income, which would be your gross rental income field minus your operating expenses field, cash flow, which is net operating income field minus debt service field, gross rent multiplier, which is purchase price divided by gross rental income, and current equity, which is current market value minus your outstanding mortgage balance. For property taxes, it's very easy to put assessed value times tax rate. For an ROI, annual cash flow divided by your total investment times 100. That gets it to a percentage. Loan to value ratio, loan amount divided by current market value times 100. And you can easily set up more complicated equations like a monthly mortgage payment. And you can see the formula for that here. As your equations become more complex, you're going to want to start building reference sheets with flat values that don't change. In this example, we have a separate sheet that will house the property tax rate from each municipality, a separate worksheet at the bottom with this reference data. So this allows your main spreadsheet to reference this spreadsheet, so every time you buy a property in an area, you don't have to go input that same data. Now you might be wondering, why use these reference points instead of just using the exact tax rate when you need it? Well, those tax rates can change, and if they do, you don't want to have to change every single formula in your spreadsheet. More reference points also make it easier to conduct what-if scenarios if you're thinking about jumping into a new market. Excel can do more complicated functions than basic arithmetic. Let's talk about some other formulas and how you can use them in your investment journey. We can see all sorts of different things that we can use. Function is one of the big ones that we use, which adds up several selected cells. Remember, this is where positive and negative numbers become so important. And again, when you click enter on the formula, it will instantly complete it. So if you're having problems getting a formula to run, make sure you didn't forget the equal sign. It's the most common mistake. There are far more operators than we have times to go over in this presentation, but here are some that are especially useful for us. Sum adds a collection of cells. Average calculates the average of a range of numbers. Minimum searches for and finds the minimum value in a range. And max searches for and finds the max value in a range. Min and max can be used when looking or searching through large data sets. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you go to insert formula, you can actually see all of the different options and select the one you want without having to know what to type in, and it will build the formula for you. There are also more complicated formulas that apply directly to us, like PMT calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate, FV, which returns the future value of a property based on constant payments and a constant interest rate, and IRR, which calculates the internal rate of return on a property given the fixed values over time. And the best part is Excel will walk you through exactly what you need to insert one of these more complicated formulas. If you simply enter equal FV, for example, you'll get a tutorial on the elements needed. It literally walks you through it. Now, as a note of caution, don't always trust their formulas and their numbers. Make sure you're verifying you're getting the returns you've calculated and consult with financial experts to make sure you haven't led yourself astray. One thing that I do is when I'm calculating these returns, it'll come up with the mortgage payment. What I will do is go to mortgagecalculator.org or one of those similar sites and run the numbers to make sure the payments match so I know my formula is right before I copy it across all of my properties. And again, if you have any questions, you can always call with me and we can go over what your needs are. Now, speaking of me, let's put all this together by looking at one of my personal spreadsheets and see how you can use what you've learned to build something similar. And remember, part 2 of this webinar is going to be going over what we use and give you a little bit of a snapshot that you can download. Now, remember the spreadsheet that we looked at earlier? All of a sudden, it's not looking so intimidating, is it? Let's go line by line over some of the things I track. Just like in our sample, this is very important. Note that address would be just above, but I've removed that for privacy. The specs and square footage gives me a baseline of what I'm working with and helps me ballpark some basic information. I use that when I'm determining rent rates and comps, sale pricing. That way I have right at my fingertips all of the specs of that property. The lot size and square footage are important to know for property taxes, renovations, sale value. I do a lot of lot sales where I split my lots and sell off the extra lot for extra money. And so very important for me to be able to see that to know if there's enough lot to be able to do that. That's the first step I look at. And then the number of units is going to be a key factor in total rent that I'm bringing in and its expected cash flow. Now, when we analyze my sheet, there's a simple sum function between the negative loan amount and the value number. It also includes rehab funds, but that's a more specific case if you're doing a loan that has rehab funds held to be used for a rehab. Now, a note on equity. As you guys know, our model hates wasted equity. So when this number starts getting too green, I know it's time to cash out in 1031. And of course, at the bottom, I would run a cash on cash return formula so that I can see over time as my value goes up, my rent changes, taxes change, insurance change. I know what my return is doing over a period of time. Now, there's a deeper version of the loan amount paid equation that we looked at earlier, and the current value of the property in question also helps me assess appreciation and value. Now, this is all information in regards to financials. I've made a drop-down list that I can select my lender from, and it gives me sample terms that I can update after I've received exact quotes. Of course, this is just one screen grab of hundreds of spreadsheets and formulas I use to track my data every week, but it gives you an example of something you can easily build yourself using what you've learned today, putting everything at your fingertips. Part 2 is going to include tailored strategies for people who have already learned the basics taught to them today or already have that information, a specific deep dive into my own folder of spreadsheets, including the metrics I track on my own properties, and specialized investing tactics that you can use after you've built the perfect spreadsheet. So to be continued August 1st at 12 and at 8. And again, don't wait. Like we said, Excel sheets and Google Sheets are the products anyone can have access to. Go begin your spreadsheet journey today. Make sure you have your information at your fingertips for the best information and the best decision making at all times. Now, I want to remind you, if you have questions, if you're looking for more information, or you have a property or a portfolio you're not quite sure what to do with, that is quite literally what I do all day, every day, with not only my consult calls, but my mentorship program. If that's something that you're interested in, please reach out. And if you haven't joined our Wealth and Rentals Facebook group, I encourage you to do so. You can ask questions there 24/7, get answers from local experts, get up to date on market and rate information, and also on the housing market. Lots of changes coming up this year as we go into this election season. We've been talking about this for the last year, and I think that there's going to be lots of positive changes coming our way as well. And I encourage you again, if you haven't joined our podcast, you can do that. Great thing to listen to while you're working out, on your way to work. We have a lot of information, a lot of webinars. And so if you haven't gone back and watched those, please do. And then I encourage you to follow us on social media. Of course, Facebook is my favorite. That's where I'm the most active, but we are posting constantly all the time. And if you still have questions or need more information, you can always contact us by email, on our website, or by phone. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I'll see you on Wednesday for our live webinar, and then we'll see you for part 2 upcoming. Thanks so much.